The most productive thing most people do every day is plan to be productive tomorrow. Not in a lazy way, not in an obvious lying on the couch way, in a very busy, very convincing way. They make lists. They research approaches. They think carefully about where to begin. They have long internal conversations about priorities. They feel, at the end of the day, like they've been working, because the thinking was real, the intention was genuine, and the effort of almost starting is surprisingly exhausting. And then tomorrow arrives, and the process repeats. This is not a book about time management. Time management implies the problem is organizational. That if you just found the right system, the right app, the right morning routine, everything would click into place. But you've probably already tried several of those. And here you are. The real problem isn't that you don't know what to do. You know exactly what to do. You've known for a while. The problem is the distance between knowing and doing, which turns out to be one of the most psychologically complex gaps in human behavior, and also one of the least honestly examined. Delay isn't laziness. That's the first thing to understand, and it matters. Laziness would actually be simpler to fix. What's happening when you procrastinate is considerably more sophisticated. You are, in a very real sense, protecting yourself from failure, from judgment. From the moment when the idea you've been keeping safe inside your head meets the actual world and has to prove itself. Delay is a preservation system. It keeps the future version of you, the one who hasn't tried yet, who hasn't been rejected yet, who still might succeed at everything, alive and intact. It's a rational strategy. It just costs you everything. What follows is an examination of that strategy, why it works so well, why your brain endorses it so enthusiastically, and why at some point, the cost of maintaining it becomes higher than the cost of abandoning it. There will be psychology in here. Real psychology, not the kind that gets paraphrased into posters. There will be some things that are uncomfortably accurate. There will be moments that are, depending on your sense of humor, either funny or devastating. Possibly both. But mostly, this is a precise look at a very human problem. The fact that you're here suggests you already suspect something needs to change. That suspicion is correct. The question is what you'll do with it. And when. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one. It's always interesting to see where this reaches. Chapter 1. The Tomorrow Architecture. Tomorrow is the most visited destination that has never once appeared on a map. People plan trips there constantly. They pack for it. They book it in their minds with a level of optimistic detail that would impress a travel agent. Tomorrow I'll start early. Tomorrow I'll have more energy. Tomorrow the conditions will be slightly better than today in ways that are hard to specify, but feel genuinely plausible. And then tomorrow arrives and becomes today, which is, unfortunately, a completely different place. This is not a new observation. People have been making it for centuries, which suggests the problem is not a lack of awareness. Knowing that you procrastinate doesn't stop you from procrastinating. In the same way that knowing sugar is bad for you doesn't make the sugar less interesting. Understanding a trap and escaping a trap are two entirely separate skills. So let's look at what the trap actually is. Most people think procrastination is about motivation, that if they just wanted something badly enough, they'd do it. But motivation explains almost nothing about why intelligent, capable people consistently delay the things they care about most. If motivation were the mechanism, you'd procrastinate on things you don't care about and act immediately on things you do. The opposite is often true. The more something matters, the harder it is to start. That's not a motivation problem. That's an identity problem. Here's what's actually happening when you tell yourself you'll start tomorrow. You are preserving a very specific fiction, the fiction of future you. Future you is a remarkable person. Future you has more discipline, more energy, better focus, and a cleaner desk. Future you has somehow resolved the ambiguity that makes current you hesitate. Future you is ready in all the ways that current you is not. Future you is also, notably, never tested. And that's the point. As long as you haven't started, future you remains perfect. The business idea is still brilliant. The book is still worth writing. The conversation is still going to go well. Nothing has been risked, nothing has been exposed, and the version of you that could do this thing remains theoretically intact. The moment you start, future you collapses into current you. And current you is imperfect, uncertain, and working with incomplete information, which is unbearable if your self-concept depends on the possibility of doing things perfectly. This is what psychologists mean when they talk about self-handicapping. The delay isn't just avoidance, it's insurance. If you never try, you never have to find out what you're actually capable of. You get to keep the better answer. Observation. I watched a man spend 11 months researching the equipment he needed to start a podcast. By the time he bought the microphone, he had decided podcasting was probably too saturated. The idea was never tested. It was just quietly retired, still in perfect condition. The Tomorrow Trap has a specific architecture. It requires 3 components to function. First, a believable reason to delay, something that sounds like wisdom rather than avoidance. I need more information. I want to do this right. The timing isn't ideal. Second, a concrete future moment that feels close enough to be real. Monday, after the holidays, once this project wraps up. Third, and most importantly, a genuine belief that future you will be a different person than current you. Remove any one of those 3 and the trap doesn't hold. The believable reason is the hardest to dismantle because it's usually partially true. You probably could use more information. The timing probably isn't perfect. These things are almost never entirely false. They're just being used to do something other than what they claim to be doing. The future moment is easier. If you look at your history with future moments, the Mondays, the January 1sts, the after this project dates, you'll notice a pattern. They arrive. They feel, once they become today, exactly as unprepared as every other today. And a new future moment gets scheduled. The belief in future you is the deepest one, and the one worth sitting with. Because here is the part nobody says out loud. Tomorrow, you will wake up in the same body, with the same history, the same fears, and the same complicated relationship with starting things. Tomorrow you is not a renovation, it's a continuation. The neural pathways that make today difficult will still be there tomorrow. The emotional resistance that makes beginning uncomfortable will still be there tomorrow. The gap between intention and action doesn't close with the passage of time. It widens. Every day you don't act is a day you practice not acting. That practice accumulates. What you're actually building, one tomorrow at a time, isn't a better starting point. You're building a longer and more convincing case that you're someone who doesn't start, which is a strange thing to spend your time constructing. But here you are, highly skilled at it. Chapter 2. Your brain is not on your side. Your brain is optimized for one thing, and it isn't your goals. It's survival. Specifically, the kind of survival relevant to an environment that stopped existing roughly 10,000 years ago. Your brain is a spectacularly well-designed piece of ancient hardware running in a world it was never built for. And the mismatch between those two things is responsible for a remarkable percentage of human suffering, failed businesses, and unopened gym memberships. Understanding this doesn't fix it, but it does change the nature of the problem. You are not weak. You are not uniquely broken. You are a modern person operating with prehistoric instincts, and some of those instincts are making your life significantly harder than it needs to be. Here's the core issue. Your brain divides the world into two categories: threats that require immediate response and everything else. In the environment it was designed for, everything else could wait. A predator couldn't. Hunger couldn't. Social exclusion from the group couldn't. That was effectively a death sentence. Everything else? Fine. Later is fine. Your goals are everything else. Starting a business, having a difficult conversation, creating something and putting it in front of people. None of these register as urgent to the part of your brain managing the threat response. They register as optional, effortful. And effort, in a resource-scarce environment, is something you conserve unless the situation demands otherwise. The situation, your brain has decided, does not demand otherwise. Meanwhile, your phone offers a notification, which is novel, which is social, which triggers the same neural response as a relevant environmental change that might matter for survival. So your brain finds that considerably more interesting than the thing you were trying to do. This is not a character flaw, it's a design specification, but it gets more specific than that. Your brain doesn't just prefer easy over hard. It has a particular relationship with uncertainty that makes the kind of action that actually changes your life almost physically uncomfortable to initiate. Every important thing you could do comes packaged with uncertainty. Will this work? Will people respond badly? Am I capable of this? What if I'm wrong? Your brain interprets uncertainty as threat. Not metaphorically. The same neural architecture that processes physical danger processes social and psychological uncertainty. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a predator and a performance review. It responds to both with the same basic instruction: avoid. And avoidance, it turns out, is very easy to dress up as something reasonable. Admission. I once spent 3 weeks deciding on the right format for a project. Before I admitted to myself I wasn't thinking about format at all. I was thinking about whether the project would be any good. Format was just the decoy. I still reach for decoys sometimes. They're very convincing. The technical term for what your brain offers you is the planning fallacy. The consistent tendency to overestimate future capability while underestimating future resistance. You believe that tomorrow you will have more time, more energy, and fewer obstacles than today despite the fact that this has never once been true. Your brain generates this prediction with complete confidence every single time. It's not lying to you. It genuinely cannot model future resistance accurately. The discomfort of starting is only available in the present tense. In the future, it's abstract. And abstract discomfort doesn't feel like discomfort. It feels like a problem you'll handle when you get there. Then you get there. And it feels exactly like today. There's another mechanism worth understanding, because it's the one that makes procrastinators feel productive. Psychologists call it moral licensing. You do something, answer emails, organize files, read an article related to your goal, and your brain registers this as progress. Not real progress, but enough progress to reduce the internal pressure that was building around the thing you're actually avoiding. The email inbox was not the obstacle, but clearing it felt like clearing something. And now the urgency has dissipated, and the day is getting on, and perhaps tomorrow would be a better time to start the real thing. Your brain did that deliberately. It found a pressure release valve so you wouldn't have to face the source of the pressure. It is trying to help you. That's the part that makes this complicated. Every mechanism that keeps you stuck, the avoidance, the rationalization, the strategic busyness, is your brain executing its primary function. Keep this person safe. Keep this person comfortable. Prevent this person from doing something that might result in failure, judgment, or the loss of social standing. The problem is that everything you actually want is located precisely in the territory your brain is trying to keep you out of. Growth is uncomfortable. Starting is uncomfortable. Being seen trying something and not yet being good at it is uncomfortable. Your brain categorizes all of that as threat adjacent and roots you away from it with the same urgency it would use to route you away from a genuinely dangerous situation. So you end up safe, comfortable, and completely stuck. The insight that changes something, not everything, but something, is this. The resistance you feel before doing something important is not evidence that you shouldn't do it. It's evidence that you're about to do something that matters. Your brain only generates serious friction around things with real stakes. It lets you scroll for an hour without a single moment of resistance. Think about what that means. The presence of resistance is the closest thing you have to a compass. It points directly at what you've been avoiding. And what you've been avoiding is, in most cases, exactly where you need to go. Your brain will not cheer for this conclusion. That's fine. You don't need its enthusiasm. You just need to stop mistaking its fear for your judgment. You're still here. 2 chapters in, that's not nothing. Most people who clicked this video moved on before they got uncomfortable. You didn't. Which means something in here is hitting close enough to stay. If that's the case, subscribe. Not because this channel needs it, because the next time you want this kind of thinking, you'll want to find it without looking for it. That's all. Back to the part that actually matters. Chapter 3, the compound math of doing nothing. Not starting has a compounding interest rate. Most people don't check the bill until it's too late. Everyone understands compound interest when it applies to money. You put something in early, it grows, the growth generates more growth, and after enough time, the numbers become difficult to believe. People find this concept inspiring when applied to savings accounts. They find it considerably less comfortable when applied to the cost of things they haven't done. But the math works in both directions. Always. Every day you delay something important, you are not simply losing that day. You are restructuring what starting will cost tomorrow. The gap between where you are and where you intended to be widens. The emotional weight of the thing you haven't done increases. The story you've accumulated about why you haven't started becomes more elaborate and more load-bearing. And somewhere underneath all of that, your confidence in your own ability to follow through quietly erodes. This is not motivational language. This is what actually happens. Picture someone who decided 18 months ago to start writing. Not professionally, just writing. Something they'd thought about for years. On the day they decided, starting felt difficult, but possible. The resistance was real, but the idea was fresh. The energy was there, and the gap between intention and action was small enough to step across. They didn't step across it. They scheduled it for the following week. 6 months later, the idea has accumulated 6 months of not doing, which means it has also accumulated 6 months of quiet shame, 6 months of self-promises broken, and 6 months of a story that now begins. I'm someone who says they're going to do things and doesn't. Starting now doesn't just require writing. It requires writing while carrying all of that, which is a significantly heavier lift than it was on day one. 18 months later, the original idea, which was genuinely good, feels stale. Not because it is stale, because they are tired of thinking about it without doing it. The emotional relationship with the idea has curdled. What began as excitement has passed through guilt and arrived somewhere close to resentment. They resent the idea for still being there, for still wanting to be started. A moment, observation. I knew a woman who had a business idea she described to me with real precision and intelligence. This was 4 years ago. Last year, she saw someone else launch almost exactly that business. Successful launch. Good reviews. She wasn't angry at the other person. She was angry at herself, which is worse, because there's nowhere to put it. The compound cost of inaction operates on multiple levels simultaneously, and this is what makes it hard to see clearly until the damage is significant. The first level is practical. Skills not developed, knowledge not gained, relationships not built. Every day you don't start a thing is a day someone who started that thing gets better at it, accumulates more experience with it, and moves further ahead. This gap is not linear. The person who started a year ago isn't just a year ahead of you. They've learned things that are only learnable through doing. They've made mistakes that vaccinated them against future mistakes. They've built a foundation you haven't touched yet. The second level is psychological. Confidence is not a fixed resource. It's generated through evidence, specifically through the experience of doing things and surviving them, or doing things and succeeding at them. Every time you act, you produce a small piece of evidence that you're capable of acting. Every time you delay, you produce the opposite. After enough delays, the evidence base starts to shift. You don't consciously think, I am someone who doesn't follow through. But something in your operating system has registered the pattern. And the next time you consider starting something, there's a new layer of resistance that wasn't there before. A quiet, background skepticism about whether you'll actually do it this time. That skepticism is expensive. It makes starting harder, which makes the next delay more likely, which generates more evidence, which deepens the skepticism. The third level is the one people talk about least, possibly because it's the most uncomfortable. Delay changes how you feel about yourself. Not dramatically, not all at once, but incrementally in the way that most important things change. You wake up one day and realize that your relationship with your own word has quietly deteriorated. That when you tell yourself you're going to do something, there's a part of you that doesn't fully believe it. Because you've heard this before. Trust, including trust in yourself, is built through consistency and destroyed through accumulated exceptions. Now here is the other side of this, because the math is genuinely symmetric. Every time you act, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when the conditions aren't ideal, especially when the first attempt is visibly imperfect, you are not just completing a task. You are generating compound interest in the opposite direction. You are producing evidence of capability. You are building momentum that makes the next action fractionally easier. You are constructing an identity, one small action at a time, that makes future action feel more natural and future delay feel more foreign. Small actions, repeated, produce results that look disproportionate to their size, not because of magic, because of accumulation. The 10th workout doesn't just produce the fitness benefit of one workout. It produces that benefit plus the momentum of 9 prior workouts, plus the identity reinforcement of being someone who has now worked out 10 times. The 100th workout is almost automatic. Not because you've become a different person, because you've accumulated enough evidence to update the story you tell about who you are. This is the architecture of change that actually works. Not the dramatic overhaul, not the complete reinvention starting Monday. The quiet, slightly boring accumulation of small actions that compound into something you wouldn't have believed possible from where you're currently standing. The cost of inaction compounds. So does the return on action. The only variable is which one you're currently investing in. Chapter 4. The preparation performance. At some point, research becomes a very convincing costume for fear. The moment is hard to identify precisely, which is part of what makes it so effective. There's no clear line between legitimate preparation and sophisticated avoidance. They look identical from the outside. They feel nearly identical from the inside. Both involve effort. Both involve engagement with the subject. Both produce the sensation of progress. Only one of them produces actual progress. The preparation trap is the most respectable form of procrastination ever invented. Nobody looks at someone reading their 4th book on entrepreneurship and thinks, that person is afraid to start a business. They think, that person is being thorough. They think, responsible. They think, smart. The person doing it thinks the same things. That's the trap. It has social cover and internal justification built directly into its structure. Watch how it operates in practice. Someone decides they want to start investing. Reasonable first step. They do some research. They read an article, then another, then a book, then 3 more books. Because the first book disagreed with the second, and they want to resolve the contradiction before they do anything with real money. Then a podcast, then a forum, then a spreadsheet comparing 7 different approaches. Then a pause because the information is genuinely contradictory and the right answer is not yet clear. 18 months later, they have not invested $1. But they could tell you in considerable detail about the theoretical merits of index funds versus active management. The information was real. The effort was real. The result was nothing. Here's what happened psychologically. Every hour of research delivered 2 things simultaneously. First, a small amount of genuine knowledge. Second, and this is the mechanism, a reduction in the internal pressure to act. Because research feels like doing something, and when you feel like you're doing something, the urgency to do the actual thing decreases. It's a pressure valve, a very educated, very industrious pressure valve. Mistake. I once prepared a presentation for 6 weeks that needed to be 3 slides. I told myself I was being rigorous. I was being terrified. When I finally gave the presentation, the questions I hadn't anticipated came anyway. The 6 weeks hadn't purchased the certainty I was trying to buy. It never does. Psychologists call the endpoint of excessive research analysis paralysis, which is an accurate but somewhat clinical description of what is essentially this. The more options you discover, the harder choosing becomes, and the harder choosing becomes, the more research feels justified And the more research feels justified, the more options you discover. The loop has no natural exit. You have to break it manually. But here's the part that makes the preparation trap genuinely insidious. It doesn't feel like a loop. It feels like progress with a temporary obstacle. It feels like you're almost ready. Just a little more information, and you'll have what you need to begin. That feeling has been present since the second week of research. It will be present in week 20 if you let it. The almost ready feeling is not a signal that you're close to being ready. It's a signal that your brain has found a comfortable place to live and is not interested in leaving. Here is the truth about preparation that nobody who sells courses wants you to internalize. Most of what you need to know about doing something can only be learned by doing it. Not because the information doesn't exist in books. It does. But because information without context is inert. It sits in your head, organized and available, completely unable to do anything until experience gives it somewhere to land. You can read everything ever written about riding a bicycle. Gear ratios, center of gravity, the physics of gyroscopic stabilization. You will still fall off the bicycle the first time. Because falling off the bicycle is not a knowledge problem. It's a calibration problem. And calibration only happens through doing. This is true of almost everything that matters. Sales technique only becomes useful when you're actually in front of a customer. Business strategy only becomes meaningful when you're running the business and hitting the specific walls that strategy was designed to help you navigate. Parenting advice becomes relevant in the moment you need it, not in the 6 months you spent reading about it before the child arrived. The information isn't useless. It's just premature. Real preparation, the kind that actually serves you, is basic and targeted. It covers what you need to take the first step safely. It answers, what do I need to know to begin? Not, what do I need to know to guarantee success? That question has no answer, which is why people asking it never start. There is a simple diagnostic for whether you're in legitimate preparation or the performance of it. Ask yourself, am I researching a specific problem I've actually encountered? Or am I researching problems I might theoretically encounter someday? The first is useful. The second is fear wearing a library card. When you're actually doing the thing, you will have real problems. Specific ones. With textures and details that no amount of advanced research could have predicted. And when those problems arrive, you will research them specifically and solve them specifically and learn something that stays with you because you earned it through contact with reality. That learning is worth more than everything you accumulated in advance, because it's indexed to experience rather than stored in abstraction. The antidote is not to stop preparing entirely. It's to set a preparation boundary before you begin. Decide in advance. I will spend this much time, learn this specific thing, and then I will start regardless of whether I feel ready. Because you will not feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling that preparation produces. It's a feeling that action produces retrospectively once you've survived beginning. You don't feel ready and then start. You start and then eventually feel ready. Everything before that is just costume. Chapter 5. The now system. The gap between knowing what to do and doing it is not an information gap. You already know this. If knowing were sufficient, the self-development industry would have collapsed decades ago from lack of demand. People would have read one good book, applied it, and gotten on with their lives. Instead, the industry grows every year, which tells you something precise about the relationship between understanding and behavior. They are not the same thing. They are not even close relatives. What sits in the gap between knowing and doing is not ignorance. It's a pause. A small, specific moment where the decision to act is available, genuinely available, the way a door is available when it's unlocked. And something happens instead of action. A thought arrives. A distraction presents itself. The moment passes, and then you're on the other side of it, still knowing, still not doing. The pause is where everything is decided. The now system exists specifically to eliminate the pause. Not to make starting feel easier. It probably won't feel easier, at least not initially. But to make the pause so short that your brain doesn't have time to populate it with reasons to wait. Now stands for three things: notice, obliterate, win. Each step is simple. None of them are easy, but together they create something your motivation and willpower have consistently failed to create. Automatic movement from intention to action. The first step is notice. This sounds almost insultingly simple until you realize how rarely people actually do it. Most procrastination happens without conscious recognition. You don't decide to procrastinate. You just find yourself at some point doing something else. The decision was made somewhere in the background, below the level of awareness, by a brain that is very good at routing you away from discomfort without alerting you to the routing. Noticing means catching the moment before the detour happens. It means developing enough awareness of your own internal states to recognize the specific sensation that precedes avoidance. For most people, this is physical. A mild tightening somewhere. A sudden urge to check something. A thought that arrives dressed as urgency, but is actually escape. Learn your version of this signal. It will be consistent once you start looking for it. Your brain uses the same routes every time. When you notice the signal, something important has already happened. You've moved the decision from the background to the foreground. It's now a conscious choice rather than a default, which means you can make a different one. Moment, observation. I watched someone receive an email they needed to respond to, an important one, professionally. And within 4 seconds, they had switched tabs, opened a news site, and spent 40 minutes reading about something they had no investment in whatsoever. They weren't aware they'd done it. When I mentioned it later, they were genuinely surprised. The avoidance was that automatic. The second step is obliterate. This is where most systems fail, because they try to negotiate. They suggest you reason with your resistance. Remind yourself of your goals. Reconnect with your motivation. Think about why this matters. Your emotional brain is not interested in this conversation. It has already made its assessment. This thing is uncomfortable, the couch is right there, and it is not going to be talked out of that assessment by a logical argument, however well constructed. Negotiating with resistance is like negotiating with a smoke alarm. The alarm is not making a point. It's making a noise. The appropriate response is not debate. Obliterating means having preloaded responses to every excuse your brain generates. Not to win the argument, but to end it fast enough that action can happen before the argument resumes. I don't have enough time. Response: I have enough time to start. That's all I need. I'm not in the right headspace. Response: headspace follows action, not the other way around. I should do this properly or not at all. Response: imperfect and done is worth more than perfect and theoretical. These aren't inspiring affirmations. They're interrupts. Their purpose is not to make you feel better about starting. Their purpose is to collapse the pause before it expands. The second part of obliterate is reducing what's called action friction, the number of micro-decisions that stand between your intention and the first physical movement. Every micro-decision is an opportunity for your brain to re-enter the conversation. Open the laptop. Find the document. Remember where you saved it. Clear some space. Make a coffee first. By the time the coffee is made, the moment is gone. Remove the steps. If you want to write, have the document open before you sit down. If you want to exercise, sleep in your workout clothes if that's what it takes. If you want to make the call, have the number dialed before you've finished deciding to call. Make the distance between intention and first action as physically short as possible. Friction is not neutral. Every additional step between deciding and doing is a weighted vote for not doing. The third step is win, and this is where the system earns its credibility, because win does not mean complete the project. Win does not mean perform well. Win does not mean produce something impressive. Win means take the smallest action available, immediately. Right now. Not after this. Now. 1 sentence. 1 push-up. 1 minute of the thing you've been avoiding. The size is not the point. The speed is the point. The faster you move from decision to first action, the less time the pause has to become a reason. Here's what happens next. And this is the part that surprises people. You intended to do one small thing. You do it. And then, not always, but often enough to matter, you keep going. Because starting is the hard part. Once you're in motion, the brain's resistance shifts. It has already registered that you're doing the thing. The threat assessment has updated. The objections quiet down. And now you're 3 paragraphs in, or 20 minutes into the workout, and the starting feels like it happened to someone else. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's tendency to keep pulling toward incomplete things once they've begun. The same mechanism that makes unfinished tasks feel nagging is the mechanism that keeps you going once you start. You can use that, but only if you start. The now system is not a motivation tool. It doesn't make you want to do things. It makes the pause between wanting and doing too short for doubt to fill. That's the entire intervention. Most people lose their days not to laziness, but to pauses. Small ones. Repeated constantly. Each individually trivial, collectively catastrophic. The now system doesn't eliminate them. It just makes them shorter than the time it takes for your brain to remember why it wanted to avoid this. Which, it turns out, is enough. Chapter 6. Distraction is designed. Your inability to concentrate is not a personal failing. It's a business model. This distinction matters more than it might initially seem. When you frame scattered attention as a character flaw, something wrong with your discipline, your focus, your willpower, you spend your energy trying to be stronger than the thing pulling at you. When you understand that your attention is being systematically harvested by organizations with billions of dollars and teams of behavioral scientists dedicated to that specific outcome, you start asking a different question. Not, why am I so weak? But, what would it take to actually protect something this valuable? Those are very different problems with very different solutions. Here is what is factually true. The apps on your phone were not designed to be useful and then accidentally became addictive. The addiction is the design. The variable reward schedule, sometimes a notification, sometimes nothing, sometimes something that matters, usually something that doesn't. is the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines work. It was imported deliberately. The people who built these systems understood operant conditioning before they wrote a single line of code. Your dopamine system did not evolve to defend itself against this. It evolved to respond to novelty because novelty, in the ancestral environment, was occasionally important. A new sound might be a predator. A new movement might be food. Paying attention to new things had survival value. Now every app on your phone is a novelty machine, and your ancient brain finds each notification as compelling as it was ever designed to find anything. This is not a fair fight. The average person checks their phone in the neighborhood of 90 times per day. That's not 90 moments of genuine need. That's 90 dopamine pulls, each one brief. Each one training your brain to expect the next one. Each one making the absence of stimulation, the silence required for actual thinking, feel increasingly unbearable. Deep work, the kind of sustained, focused attention that produces anything genuinely valuable, requires exactly the neurological conditions that constant distraction destroys. You cannot think carefully about a complex problem while part of your brain is listening for the next notification. You cannot write anything worth reading while your attention is split between the page and the tab you have open just in case. You cannot build anything significant in the fragments of focus left over after a day of constant interruption. And yet this is precisely how most people work. In fragments. Checking, switching, half attending to everything, fully attending to nothing. Moment. Admission. I wrote an entire first draft of something once with my email open in the background. I told myself I was being efficient. What I produced required almost complete rewriting. The draft wasn't bad because I lack ability. It was bad because I was never fully present for a single sentence of it. I still have to actively fight the habit of the open tab. I don't always win. The cost here goes beyond productivity in the narrow sense. When you can't sustain attention, you can't think deeply. And when you can't think deeply, you become dependent on other people's thinking. You consume takes instead of forming positions. You react instead of reflect. You move through the world in a state of continuous partial attention, always slightly engaged, never fully present, permanently operating below your actual capacity. This is what distraction addiction produces at scale. Not just wasted time, intellectual shallowness. The inability to sit with a difficult idea long enough to actually understand it. The solution is not willpower. Willpower against a billion-dollar attention extraction system is a losing strategy by design. The solution is environmental, which means changing the conditions rather than trying to be stronger than the conditions. This starts with physical separation. Your phone in another room is not an inconvenience. It is a meaningful reduction in the cognitive load required to focus. Research on this is remarkably consistent. The mere presence of a smartphone on a desk, face down, silent, reduces available cognitive capacity. Not because you're checking it, because part of your brain is monitoring it. Removing it from the room removes the monitoring requirement. Close the tabs. Not minimize, close. Every open tab is a small claim on your attention, a little flag planted in your peripheral awareness saying, "This is unfinished, this might matter, don't forget about me." 30 open tabs is 30 small flags. Your brain is attempting to track all of them while you try to focus on one thing. This is why you feel mentally exhausted by midday without having produced much. These are structural changes. They don't require discipline in the moment because they remove the decision from the moment entirely. You can't check the phone that isn't in the room. You can't get distracted by the tab that isn't open. The environment does the work that willpower was failing to do. But environmental design handles the external problem. There's still an internal one. Your brain, after years of constant stimulation, has recalibrated what normal feels like. Silence feels wrong. Stillness feels like something is missing. The absence of input registers as boredom, and boredom now feels genuinely uncomfortable in a way it didn't before smartphones existed. So even in a distraction-free environment, you'll feel the pull toward stimulation, toward checking something, doing something, moving toward input. This feeling is real. It's also temporary. And learning to sit with it rather than immediately resolving it is one of the more valuable things you can train. Boredom, it turns out, is not the enemy of productivity. It's the precondition for a specific kind of thinking that stimulation permanently interrupts. The ideas that arrive in the shower, on a long walk, in the silence before sleep, these aren't accidents. They're what happens when your brain is given enough quiet to make connections it can't make, while it's busy processing input. Creative insight requires idle time, not lazy time. Specifically idle, unscheduled, unstimulated, slightly uncomfortable time. You have been systematically eliminating this from your life, and then wondering why you feel stuck. Start with focus sprints. 25 minutes. One task. No phone in the room. No extra tabs open. No exceptions. When your attention wanders, and it will, because you've been training it to wander for years, bring it back without ceremony. No self-criticism, just return. Each return is a small strengthening of something that has been weakening for a long time. The goal is not monk-like focus achieved permanently through sheer force of character. The goal is the ability to choose, when it matters, to be fully present for something that deserves your full presence. To direct your attention rather than surrender it. Your attention is the medium through which your entire life is experienced. Every relationship, every piece of work, every moment of genuine satisfaction passes through it. There are organizations whose entire business model depends on capturing as much of it as possible and selling it to advertisers. The least interesting version of your life is the one where that works. Chapter 7. The momentum physics. The hardest part of any habit isn't the habit. It's the pause right before you decide whether to have one. Physics has a concept that applies to human behavior with uncomfortable precision. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Newton wasn't writing about productivity. He was describing the universe. But the universe, it turns out, doesn't make exceptions for people who are trying to start exercising. The force required to move something from stillness to motion is always greater than the force required to keep something already moving. Always. This is not a motivational metaphor. It's a physical law that your body and psychology both obey, independently and simultaneously. Which means the most expensive moment in any positive behavior is not the middle of it. It's the beginning, the moment before the beginning, the pause where the question is still open. Most people misunderstand why habits fail. They assume failure happens in the hard moments, the rainy morning when running outside seems unreasonable, the exhausting day when the project feels impossible, the moment when the path of least resistance is loudly and obviously attractive. But habits usually don't fail in the hard moments. They fail in the ordinary ones. The Tuesday that felt fine, the Thursday with no particular obstacle, the moment where you simply didn't start, for no dramatic reason, and then didn't start the next day either, and then the gap between the last time you did the thing and right now became long enough to carry weight. Momentum is not motivation. This is a distinction worth being precise about, because people conflate them constantly, and it costs them. Motivation is emotional. It arrives unpredictably, responds to content like this, peaks for a period of hours to days, and then subsides back to baseline. It is a genuinely unreliable foundation for behavior because it cannot be summoned on demand. You cannot decide to feel motivated the way you can decide to set an alarm. Momentum is structural. It's the residue of prior action. It accumulates through repetition, and it functions independently of how you feel about the activity in question. The person with strong exercise momentum doesn't work out because they're motivated. They work out because not working out has started to feel like the deviation from normal. The behavior has become the path of least resistance through sheer repetition. This is the state you're trying to reach, and the only way to reach it is through the early, unglamorous phase where momentum doesn't exist yet, and you have to act anyway. Moment, observation. I knew someone who ran every day for 4 months. Then they got sick for a week. Genuinely sick. Reasonable to rest. When they recovered, they didn't run for another 3 months. Not because they were still sick, because the pause had broken the chain, and getting back on the other side of that pause turned out to require the same effort as starting from scratch, which they weren't sure they had. So they waited until they were sure, which meant they waited until they weren't sure of anything, because that's not how certainty works. The 2-minute rule is not a productivity hack. It's a momentum engineering tool, and understanding the distinction changes how you use it. The goal of committing to 2 minutes of something is not to accomplish 2 minutes of something. It's to get yourself on the moving side of the stillness-motion divide. Because once you're moving, once you've put on the shoes, opened the document, dialed the number, the physics shift in your favor. Continuation requires less force than initiation every time. So you commit to 1 sentence, 1 push-up, 1 minute of the thing. Not because 1 sentence changes anything by itself, but because 1 sentence moves you from the category of person who hasn't started to person who has started. And those 2 categories have different gravitational pulls. The sentence usually becomes a paragraph. The push-up usually becomes a set. The minute usually becomes 20. Not because you tricked yourself into it, because you removed the largest obstacle, the beginning, and what came after was simply continuation, which is easier. Action chains work on this same principle, but at a larger architectural scale. Instead of thinking about individual behaviors in isolation, you design sequences where each action reduces the friction for the next one. Workout clothes next to the bed. Shoes already tied before you've made the decision to run. Coffee brewing before you sit at the desk. Each link in the chain is small. The chain as a whole makes the desired behavior feel less like a decision and more like what happens next. The brain responds to sequences. It likes completion. It finds incompletion uncomfortable. Starting a chain engages this mechanism. The same one that makes you finish a mediocre television episode even when you don't particularly want to know what happens. You started it. Something in you wants it finished. You can use this deliberately. Now, the part that most momentum frameworks quietly ignore because it's inconvenient. Chains break. Streaks end. Illness arrives. Travel disrupts. Life is periodic and your habits will be too, no matter how well designed your system is. The question is not whether the chain will break. It will break. The question is what you do in the 24 hours after it breaks. This is where most people make the expensive mistake. They treat a broken chain as evidence about their character rather than as a data point about their circumstances. They conclude that missing one workout proves they're not someone who works out. That one unproductive day reveals the truth about their discipline. That the exception is actually the rule. And then, having drawn this conclusion, they wait. For the right time to restart, for the motivation to return, for conditions that feel clean enough to begin again. The waiting is where the real damage happens, not the missed day, the gap between the missed day and the return. Successful people are not people who never break their chains. They are people who have developed what might be called rapid recovery as a reflex. The chain broke yesterday. Today you restart. Not next Monday. Not after you've processed the failure adequately. Today, immediately, at whatever reduced level is necessary. If you were working out 5 days a week, restart at 2. If you were writing 2,000 words a day, restart at 300. The number is not the point. The point is that you are back on the moving side of the equation before the stillness has time to solidify. Momentum in the wrong direction is also momentum. The longer you stay still, the more starting costs. The sooner you move, the cheaper it gets. This is the entire physics of the situation. It doesn't care about your reasons for stopping. It doesn't care about your intentions to restart. It only responds to what you actually do. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. The only variable you control is how long you let yourself be one. Chapter 8. Perfectionism is cowardice in a good coat. Nobody has ever called their fear by its real name on the first try. They call it standards. They call it integrity. They call it caring about quality. They call it not wanting to put something into the world that doesn't represent their best work. These are all reasonable-sounding things. They're also, in a significant percentage of cases, fear, specifically dressed, carefully groomed, and presented with enough confidence that even the person wearing it believes the costume. Perfectionism is the most socially acceptable form of self-sabotage ever invented. It gets praised. People say, "She has such high standards. He really cares about the work." They're not wrong, exactly. The standards are real. The caring is real. What's also real underneath both of those things is a terror of being seen trying and found inadequate. And the standards and the caring are doing excellent work keeping that terror invisible. Here is what perfectionism actually is, stated without the costume. It is the refusal to be evaluated. Not the refusal to be evaluated negatively. The refusal to be evaluated at all. Because evaluation requires that you produce something. And producing something requires that you risk it being insufficient. And risking insufficiency is the one thing the perfectionist brain has organized its entire operating structure to prevent. The logic is airtight, as long as you don't look directly at what it costs. The perfect project that lives permanently in your head cannot fail. It also cannot succeed. It cannot teach you anything. It cannot reach anyone. It cannot generate the feedback that would make the next version better. It exists in a state of permanent theoretical excellence, which is a very comfortable place to keep something you're afraid of. Meanwhile, the imperfect thing someone else made and released is in the world, being used, being responded to, being improved through iteration, getting better in ways that require contact with reality to achieve. The perfectionist looks at this and thinks, but it wasn't ready. Without noticing that ready is not a state a thing achieves, it's a permission a person grants. And perfectionists are constitutionally unable to grant it. Mistake. I delayed sending a piece of writing for so long, revising it past the point where revision helped, that by the time I released it, I had lost all perspective on whether it was good. I couldn't tell anymore. I'd read it too many times. The extended process had not made it better. It had made me unable to evaluate it. The version I'd written in the second week was probably the best one. I published the version from week 9. Psychologists describe something called the perfectionism paradox, and it is exactly as ironic as the name suggests. The more perfect you try to make something, the worse it often becomes. Not because effort degrades quality. Effort doesn't degrade quality. But because the kind of effort perfectionism produces is the wrong kind. Perfectionism focuses effort on the wrong things. It polishes the surface while the structure goes unexamined. It refines the sentence while the argument stays weak. It adjusts the design while the core concept remains untested. Because testing the core concept requires releasing it, and releasing it is the thing perfectionism is specifically designed to prevent. So you end up with something beautifully finished on the outside and structurally uncertain underneath. Released to nobody, improving nothing. Here's a thing that is true and slightly uncomfortable. The most skilled people in almost every field are not the ones who got everything right early. They are the ones who produced the most iterations. The writer who has published 50 imperfect essays is a better writer than the one who has spent the same time perfecting one essay that nobody has read. Not because quantity automatically produces quality, because quantity produces the specific kind of learning. Mistake-indexed, feedback-driven, reality-tested, that quality actually requires. Excellence is downstream of repetition, not downstream of the pursuit of excellence. This is what perfectionists get backwards. They believe that if they can just make this one thing perfect, they'll have demonstrated their capability. But capability is not demonstrated through one perfect thing. It's built through many imperfect things, each one incrementally better than the last, each one teaching something the previous one couldn't. The first pancake is always bad. Professional pancake makers know this. They don't stand over the pan trying to make the first one perfect. They accept that the first one is calibration. It tells the pan what temperature it's at. It tells you what the batter needs. It gets thrown away. Then you make the good ones. Perfectionism is trying to skip the first pancake, which is not how pancakes work. Now, the emotional work, because this is where intellectual understanding usually stalls. Perfectionism is rooted in something specific, not laziness, not arrogance. Fear of a very particular kind. The fear of being seen as less than you appear. Most perfectionists carry a quiet, persistent belief that their value is conditional. That if they produce something insufficient, they will be revealed as insufficient. That the gap between how they're perceived and what they actually are will become visible. This belief is the engine. The standards, the revising, the perpetual not quite ready, these are all fuel the engine burns to keep moving. And because the belief is emotional rather than rational, rational arguments against perfectionism don't touch it. You can know, intellectually, that done is better than perfect. You can agree with the argument completely. and still not release the thing. Because the argument addresses the behavior. The fear is in the identity. The only thing that actually moves this is evidence. Specifically, evidence accumulated through intentional imperfection, through releasing things before they feel ready and discovering that the world continues. That criticism, when it arrives, is survivable. That imperfect work can still reach people, help people, be valued by people. That your value is not actually suspended on the outcome of each individual thing you produce. This evidence cannot be gathered through thinking. It requires doing. Specifically, doing things badly enough to be afraid of them and surviving the release. Start small. Low stakes. A message you don't edit 3 times. A post you don't delete after an hour. An idea you share before it's fully formed. Each one a small deposit into an evidence base that your brain is currently running on empty. The goal is not to stop caring about quality. Quality is worth caring about. The goal is to stop using quality as the reason you never show anyone anything. Done and imperfect is in the world. Perfect and unfinished is in your head. Only one of those can become something. Chapter 9. Manufacturing urgency. Deadlines are the only productivity system that has ever actually worked, which is why people avoid creating them for the things that matter most. Think about the last time you had a real deadline, an external one, with actual consequences, a submission due, a presentation scheduled, a flight that would not wait. Think about how much you accomplished in the final hours before that deadline compared to the weeks preceding it. Think about how problems that had seemed intractable suddenly resolved themselves under sufficient time pressure. Think about how the quality of your focus in that final stretch bore almost no resemblance to the quality of your focus during the open-ended preparation period that came before it. You were the same person. The task was the same task. The only variable was the presence of a hard stop. This is not a coincidence, and it's not a character flaw. It's a neurological reality. Your brain allocates attention based on perceived urgency. In the presence of a real deadline, urgency is unambiguous. The cost of not acting is immediate and visible. Your brain responds accordingly, prioritizing, focusing, completing things it had been circling for weeks without landing. In the absence of a deadline, urgency is theoretical. The cost of not acting is distant, abstract, and heavily discounted by a brain that has always been better at responding to present threats than future consequences. So the important thing, the thing that genuinely matters for your actual life, gets quietly deprioritized every day in favor of whatever feels urgent right now. Your inbox is urgent. Your phone is urgent. The small administrative task someone just asked about is urgent. Your novel, your business, your health, your creative work. These are important. And importance without urgency loses to urgency without importance. Every single time. In every single person, without exception. The solution is not to care less about the urgent things. The solution is to manufacture urgency around the important ones. A moment, observation. I watched a person set the same goal for 3 consecutive years at the start of January. Same goal, almost identical language, same level of genuine intention each time. The first year, it lasted 6 weeks. The second year, 4. The third year, he added a vision board. It lasted 5 weeks. The goal had no deadline, no stakes, no mechanism for consequence. It was a wish dressed as a plan. The 4th year, he told his business partner he'd have a working prototype by a specific date, or he'd personally fund their next team dinner, an amount large enough to be uncomfortable. He finished 2 weeks early. The distinction that matters here is between real consequences and performed consequences. Your brain is remarkably good at detecting the difference. When you tell yourself that missing your goal will make you feel disappointed, your brain correctly identifies this as a consequence it can negotiate with. It knows from extensive historical experience that you can feel disappointed and recover. It knows that the internal cost of failure is manageable. So it doesn't treat the deadline as real. Real consequences are external, specific, and non-negotiable. Money that actually leaves your account. A public commitment that actually creates social exposure. An event you've actually registered for that requires you to be ready by a fixed date. These work not because they're clever, but because they engage the same neurological urgency mechanisms that respond to genuine external pressure. Your brain cannot negotiate with a credit card charge that has already processed. Public accountability pressure is the most accessible version of this. Not soft accountability, not telling a supportive friend who will be kind regardless of outcome. Hard accountability, someone who will actually follow up. Someone whose opinion of you is relevant enough to create genuine discomfort if you fail in front of them. Someone with explicit instructions not to let you off the hook. The discomfort of public failure is not pleasant to anticipate. That discomfort is the entire mechanism. You're not trying to enjoy the accountability. You're trying to make the cost of inaction immediate enough that your brain treats it with the same seriousness it gives to an actual deadline. Money stakes work on a similar principle but more directly. The amount needs calibration. Too small and your brain discounts it. Too large and the anxiety becomes counterproductive. The useful range is somewhere that produces a clear, specific discomfort. Enough to matter, not enough to destabilize. Somewhere between 1 week and 1 month of discretionary spending is the range most people find functional. The critical element, and this is where most people undermine the system, is the removal of your own ability to grant yourself an exception when the time comes. Give the money to someone else. Use an app that charges automatically. Create a mechanism that operates independently of your future self's willingness to follow through. Because your future self, faced with the deadline, will be very creative about finding reasons why this particular situation warrants flexibility. Do not give your future self that option. Your future self is not to be trusted with this decision. You know this because your future self is the same person who has been rescheduling the start date for months. Deadline stacking addresses a different problem: the way that distant deadlines produce false comfort. 3 months feels like a long time. It feels long enough that today's version of the task feels non-urgent. So you don't start today, which means you don't start tomorrow either, because tomorrow is still 3 months away. By the time the deadline is close enough to feel real, you've lost 2.5 months to the illusion of plenty. Deadline stacking means breaking the 3 months into 12 weeks, each with a specific deliverable and a specific consequence for missing it. Now, the distance between you and a real deadline is never more than 7 days, which is short enough that your brain cannot comfortably defer. The urgency is always present. The compression is continuous. This is not comfortable. It's not supposed to be comfortable. Comfort is what you have right now, and comfort is what's producing the current results. One mechanism that people consistently underestimate is competition. Not aggressive competition, simply having someone else working toward a comparable goal with visible progress. When someone you know is further along than you, something activates that pure intellectual motivation cannot. It's older than cognition. It's the same mechanism that made your ancestors pay attention when someone else found food. You don't need to manufacture this feeling. You just need to put yourself in an environment where progress is visible and comparative. Find a group. Make your progress public within it. Let the momentum of other people's action create pressure on your own. The key principle running underneath all of this is immediacy. Your brain discounts future consequences at an astonishing rate. A consequence 30 days away produces a fraction of the behavioral pressure that a consequence tomorrow produces. Every urgency system you build should be designed to move consequences as close to the present moment as possible. The goal is to make doing nothing feel more expensive than doing something. Right now. Today. Not eventually. Most people have accidentally designed their lives in the opposite direction, where action is effortful and inaction is free. They wonder why they don't act. Urgency is not a feeling you wait for. It's a condition you engineer, and the engineering is entirely within your control. Chapter 10. The identity you keep proving. You behave consistently with who you believe you are, even when who you believe you are is someone who never follows through. This is not an accusation. It's a description of how identity works, applied without flattery. Identity is not an aspiration. It's not what you'd like to be or what you intend to become, or what you tell people at dinner parties when they ask what you're working on. Identity is the operating system running underneath all of that. It's the set of beliefs about yourself that your behavior is constantly, quietly, automatically trying to confirm, and your behavior will confirm it. Whichever version of yourself you actually believe in, not the one you claim to believe in, but the one you act from, that's the one getting reinforced every day. Every choice you make is a small piece of evidence added to a case, the case for who you are. Most people are building that case without knowing they're doing it. Here is the mechanism in its simplest form. You have a belief about yourself. Say that you're someone who starts things but doesn't finish them. You didn't choose this belief consciously. It accumulated from experience, from patterns noticed over time, from the quiet accumulation of small pieces of evidence that nobody explicitly summarized, but your brain filed anyway. Now the belief exists, and now, when you face a choice about whether to follow through on something, the belief is in the room, shaping the odds, tilting the floor slightly in one direction. You don't hear it say, "You won't finish this." You just feel a subtle decrease in urgency, a slight increase in the reasonableness of waiting, a familiar comfort with the idea of returning to this later. The belief doesn't announce itself. It just adjusts the gravity. This is why behavior change that focuses only on behavior fails at the rate that it does. You can install a new habit through sheer force for a period of time, but if the underlying identity hasn't changed, if you still fundamentally believe you're someone who doesn't maintain things, then the habit is a foreign object in a body that will eventually reject it. The identity is always there, pulling behavior back toward consistency with itself. The only durable change is identity change, and identity changes through evidence, specifically through the accumulation of small, specific, concrete moments where you acted differently than your old story predicted. Admission. For a long time, I believed I was someone who worked well under pressure and poorly without it. This was accurate and also convenient, because it meant that any period without external pressure was legitimately not my fault. I was just built this way. It took longer than I'd like to admit to notice that I was choosing situations that confirmed the belief rather than testing it. The belief wasn't describing me. I was protecting the belief by staying inside it. This is the difference between outcome-based identity and process-based identity. And it matters more than it sounds. Outcome-based identity sounds like, I am a successful person. I am fit. I am a writer. The problem with these is that they're dependent on external results. Results that fluctuate, that take time to arrive, that can be disrupted by circumstances outside your control. When the results don't materialize on schedule, the identity wobbles. And a wobbling identity produces inconsistent behavior, which produces worse results, which wobbles the identity further. Process-based identity sounds like, I am someone who shows up. I am someone who does the work regardless of how I feel about it today. I am someone who starts things and stays with them. These identities are not contingent on outcomes. They're contingent on actions you control directly, which means they're stable in a way that outcome-based identities can never be. When your identity is process-based, a bad result doesn't threaten who you are. It's just a result. You're still someone who shows up. You show up again tomorrow. The identity remains intact and keeps generating the behavior that will eventually produce the outcomes you want. But, and this is the part that requires patience, process-based identity is built slowly, one small action at a time. Each action a vote. Each vote a piece of evidence. The evidence accumulates until the story shifts. You don't become someone who exercises by deciding to be someone who exercises. You become someone who exercises by exercising repeatedly until the evidence base is large enough that the story updates. Until not exercising starts to feel like the inconsistency rather than exercising. This means the early phase is the hardest and also the most important. When there's no momentum yet, no established pattern, no track record to draw on, this is when the identity is most fragile and the pull toward old behavior is strongest. This is when one missed day feels like evidence of who you really are. It isn't. One missed day is one data point. The story is written by the pattern, not the exception. What you say to yourself about yourself during this phase matters considerably. The internal language of identity is not decorative. When you say, I'm not a disciplined person, you're not describing yourself. You're instructing yourself. You're telling the operating system which behaviors to route toward and which to route away from. The system listens. It's very literal. Replacing I'm not disciplined with I'm building discipline, or I'm becoming someone who follows through, does something specific and real. It creates a category, person in the process of changing, that has room for imperfection without contradiction. You can miss a day and still be someone who is building discipline. You cannot miss a day and easily remain someone who is disciplined. The first identity is durable. The second is fragile. Small actions are the votes. Language is the ballot box. Both matter. There is one more shift worth naming, because it changes the emotional texture of everything. Most people experience their important habits as obligations. I have to work out. I have to write. I have to make the calls. Have to is the language of external pressure, of something being done to you, extracted from you, required of you against your preferences. It produces compliance when the pressure is high enough and resentment when it isn't. Get to is different. I get to work out. I get to work on this. Not as a forced reframe, not as toxic positivity, but as an accurate description of what it means to be someone who has decided what matters to them and is acting accordingly. People who don't have the health to exercise don't get to work out. People who don't have an idea worth developing don't get to work on something they care about. The privilege is real. The language just needs to catch up with it. When you build a process-based identity anchored in genuine values, something quietly changes. You stop needing urgency to act. You stop needing motivation to start. You stop needing perfect conditions to begin. Because the action is no longer something you're trying to force yourself to do. It's just what people like you do. And you've been collecting evidence of that for a while now. Chapter 11. Fear is the compass, not the wall. If something important doesn't make you slightly sick to your stomach before you start it, you're probably not doing something important. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Not because it's comforting, it isn't particularly, but because it reframes the entire relationship between fear and action in a way that changes what fear means when it arrives. Most people treat fear as a stop sign, as information from a reliable source that the thing being considered is dangerous, inadvisable, or beyond current capability. The fear arrives, the person slows down, and eventually the thing doesn't happen. And this feels, from the inside, like a reasonable response to a reasonable signal, like prudence, like self-awareness. But look at what the fear is actually attached to. Not predators, not physical danger, not situations where the body is genuinely at risk. The fear is attached to sending the email, posting the work, starting the business, having the conversation that has been needed for months, asking for the thing, saying the true thing out loud. None of these are dangerous. They are uncomfortable. And your brain, operating on ancient hardware designed for a world where discomfort and danger were closely correlated, cannot reliably tell the difference. So it sends the same signal for both. The same tightening, the same elevated heart rate, the same strong suggestion to stop, retreat, reconsider. The signal that once kept your ancestors alive is now preventing you from sending a professional email, and it is doing so with complete physiological sincerity. This is the misread that costs people years. Fear is not evidence that you shouldn't proceed. Fear is evidence that you're about to do something that matters enough to your brain to generate a threat response. And your brain only generates threat responses around things with real stakes. It does not threaten you away from scrolling. It does not create resistance around watching another episode. It saves its alarm systems for the territory where something could actually change. The fear is pointing at the change. That's all it's doing. Moment, observation. I watched someone spend 4 years working up to a single professional conversation. One they needed to have, knew they needed to have, rehearsed privately dozens of times. The conversation, when it finally happened, took 11 minutes. The outcome was positive. They came back slightly stunned, not by the result, but by the ratio. 4 years of fear, 11 minutes of reality. The monster was precisely the size of the door it was standing behind, and not 1 inch larger. The distinction between useful fear and useless fear is worth making precisely. Useful fear keeps you away from actual harm, from the edge of the cliff, from the car that's moving too fast, from the situation where real damage is genuinely possible. It is specific. It is proportionate. It is attached to something that could actually hurt you. Useless fear is everything else. It keeps you away from discomfort, uncertainty, judgment, and the possibility of failure. It is specific in how it feels, but wildly disproportionate in what it's responding to. The prospect of public embarrassment triggers the same physiological response as physical threat. despite the fact that public embarrassment, while genuinely unpleasant, has never killed anyone. When fear arrives, the useful question is not, should I be afraid of this? The useful question is, what is this fear protecting me from? Actual harm or discomfort? If the answer is discomfort, the fear is useless. And useless fear is information about direction, not about capability. It's telling you where the growth is. It's marking the territory your comfort zone hasn't entered yet. It's the most accurate map of what you haven't done that you will ever have access to. The people who build things, create things, start things, they are not people who feel less fear than you. They are people who have developed a different relationship with the feeling. They have, through enough repeated experiences of feeling afraid and acting anyway, accumulated evidence that the fear and the actual outcome are rarely proportionate. That the anticipation is almost always worse than the event. That, on the other side of the thing that felt dangerous, is usually just the next thing. Slightly different circumstances. Occasionally, a good result. Almost never the catastrophe the fear was advertising. This evidence cannot be acquired through thought. Thinking about being brave does not produce the experience of discovering that the feared thing was survivable. Only doing it produces that. Which means the only way out of fear is through it. Directly, with the fear still present. Not waiting for the fear to resolve before acting. The fear does not resolve before acting. It resolves after. Sometimes during, almost never before. There is a technique worth practicing here that psychologists call acceptance rather than resistance. When fear arrives, the instinct is to fight it, to try to talk yourself out of being afraid, to suppress the physical sensations, to argue the fear into submission. This approach consistently fails because resisting an emotion amplifies it. The more energy you spend pushing against fear, the more present the fear becomes. Acceptance works differently. You acknowledge the fear without trying to change it. You say, internally or aloud, I notice I'm afraid of this, and then you do it anyway. Not because the fear has resolved, because the fear is no longer the variable that determines whether you act. This is not a trick. It's a genuine shift in the relationship between emotion and behavior. You are not eliminating fear. You are removing its veto power. Over time, with repetition, something else happens. Your brain updates its threat assessment around specific situations. Every time you feel afraid of something and do it anyway and survive, which you will, because the feared things are almost never as dangerous as advertised, your brain files a small piece of evidence. This thing did not destroy me. The threat model was inaccurate. Recalibrating. The recalibration is slow, but it's real, and it compounds. The 10th time you do something that used to terrify you, the fear is smaller than it was the first time. Not gone. Smaller. More proportionate. Less able to stop you. There is one more thing worth saying about fear, because it reframes the entire experience in a way that changes the emotional valence of what you're about to do. Fear and excitement are physiologically identical. Same elevated heart rate, same heightened awareness, same sense that something significant is about to happen. The only difference between them is the story you attach to the sensations. Fear says, something bad is coming. Excitement says, something significant is coming. The body cannot tell the difference. Only the interpretation differs. You have the ability to choose the interpretation. Not always easily, not without practice. But the choice is genuinely available. The next time your chest tightens before something important, There is an accurate alternative to the fear narrative. You are about to do something that matters. Your body knows it. That's why it's paying attention. The life you want is located, with remarkable consistency, precisely where the fear is pointing. It has been waiting there for a while. Design the environment, not the willpower. Willpower is a resource. Your environment is a system. Systems beat resources every time. This isn't a close competition. Resources deplete. They have good days and bad days. They respond to sleep quality, blood sugar, stress levels, and whether someone was rude to you in traffic this morning. Resources are variable by nature, which means any behavior that depends on them is variable by nature. Which means, if your plan for maintaining important habits is to want it badly enough on a consistent basis, your plan has a structural flaw that no amount of motivation can fix. Systems don't have bad days. Systems don't get tired. Systems don't lose resolve after a difficult afternoon. Systems simply produce the outputs they were designed to produce consistently, regardless of how you feel about it. The people who appear to have extraordinary discipline, who exercise consistently, who produce consistently, who maintain the habits that seem to require heroic amounts of self-control, are mostly not more disciplined than you. They've just built better systems. Their environments are doing the work that willpower is doing in yours. And since their environments don't get tired, the results are more consistent, which looks from outside like character, but is mostly just architecture. This is excellent news if you understand what it means. It means the question isn't, how do I become more disciplined? It's, how do I design my surroundings so the right choice is the obvious choice? These are very different projects. The first requires you to change who you are. The second requires you to change where the things are. Friction is the core concept. Every behavior has a friction level, the number and difficulty of steps between you and the action. High friction behaviors happen rarely. Low friction behaviors happen constantly. This is not a function of how important the behavior is or how much you care about it. It's purely mechanical. The easier something is to do, the more often it gets done. This works in both directions simultaneously. You want to increase the friction on behaviors that undermine your goals and decrease the friction on behaviors that support them. Not through willpower, through physical arrangement, through where things are located in your space, through what requires effort and what doesn't. Moment observation. Someone I know wanted to read more and watch less television. They tried motivation. They tried scheduling. They tried commitment devices. None of it held for more than 2 weeks. Eventually, almost as an experiment, they moved the television remote to a drawer in another room and put a book on the arm of their couch. Reading went up. Television went down. Not because they had become a different person, because the book was closer than the remote. That was the entire intervention. The drawer was 6 feet away. 6 feet was enough. The phone is the most important friction variable in most people's environments, and most people have optimized it in exactly the wrong direction. The phone is on the desk. The phone is face up. The phone is charged and within arm's reach at all times. Every notification is immediate. Every pull is instant. The friction between you and distraction is essentially zero. Meanwhile, the important work, the writing, the thinking, the creating, is somewhere in the same room, theoretically available, but requiring focus and effort to access. The friction between you and meaningful work is high. Relative to the phone, it requires considerably more from you. So the phone wins. Every time. Not because you're weak, because the game is rigged by the current arrangement. Rearrange the game. Phone in another room during focused work. Not silenced, removed. The difference between a silenced phone on your desk and a phone in another room is not just the absence of sound. It's the removal of the monitoring load. Part of your brain is always aware of the phone when it's present. It's tracking it, wondering. The awareness is a tax on your attention, even when you're not actively looking at it. Remove the phone. Stop paying the tax. The same principle applies to your workspace itself. Clutter is not aesthetically displeasing. It's cognitively expensive. Every object in your visual field that doesn't belong to the current task is a small claim on processing resources. A cluttered desk is a desk that requires your brain to continuously sort relevant from irrelevant. A clear desk is a desk that says, "This is the only thing." The state of your physical environment is not a reflection of your productivity. It's a determinant of it. Not because messy people are less capable, because messy environments produce more cognitive load, and cognitive load competes directly with the focused attention that good work requires. Beyond the physical, your social environment operates on the same principles with even more force. The people you spend significant time with are not neutral. They have norms. They have expectations. They model behaviors. They create a baseline for what's normal in your immediate world. And human beings are, at a deep neurological level, calibrated to match the behaviors of those around them. This is not weakness. It's social cognition, the mechanism that allowed humans to coordinate and cooperate at scale. It means that if the people around you procrastinate, normalize delay, and treat ambitious goals as things you discuss rather than pursue, you will find it harder to behave differently. Not impossible. Harder. The social environment is creating friction against the behavior you want. Seek out people for whom the behavior you want is already normal. Not to network, not for inspiration. Because proximity to people who do the thing makes the thing feel more possible, more normal, more like something people actually do. Ambition calibrates to its surroundings. Your information environment matters here too, though people rarely treat it as environment. What you read, watch, and listen to is not just entertainment or education. It's the material your subconscious uses to construct its model of what's normal, what's possible, and what people like you do. Consume content that normalizes inaction, victimhood, and permanent obstacles, and your subconscious builds a model accordingly. Consume content that normalizes agency, iteration, and people doing difficult things imperfectly, and the model shifts. You don't have to believe everything you consume. You just have to consume it repeatedly. Repetition is the mechanism. The belief follows. Design the information environment as deliberately as you design the physical one. The final principle, and the one that makes all of this sustainable rather than effortful, is what's called the default. Every environment has defaults, things that happen automatically when no active choice is made. The default behavior is the behavior that requires the least friction, the fewest decisions, the smallest departure from whatever was happening before. Most people's defaults are working against them. The default when sitting at a desk is to open email. The default when feeling bored is to reach for the phone. The default when starting a work session is to do the easy tasks first. Redesign the defaults. Make the first thing that happens when you sit at your desk the important task, not email. Make the first thing you reach for when bored something that serves you. Make the easy task require an extra step so it stops being the automatic choice. When your defaults align with your goals, you don't need discipline. You need to not actively override the system. That's a much smaller ask. Your environment is either designing your behavior or you are designing your environment. There is no third option. And right now, for most people, the environment is winning by default. The good news is that defaults can be changed, usually with something as simple as moving where things are. 6 feet sometimes is enough. Chapter 13. How to fall and not stay there. Everyone fails. The distinguishing variable is how long the failure lasts, not whether it happens, not how severe it is, not what caused it, how long you stay in it after it lands. That's the variable. That's the one that separates people who eventually get where they're trying to go from people who accumulate a history of almost got theirs. Most people understand this intellectually. Failure is part of the process. Everyone fails. Learn from your mistakes. These are things people say at graduation ceremonies and in motivational content, and to other people going through difficult moments. They are also, frequently, things people say without having integrated them into how they actually respond when failure arrives in their specific life at an inconvenient time. Because failure doesn't arrive feeling educational. It arrives feeling like evidence. Evidence about your capability, your judgment, your readiness, your fundamental suitability for the thing you were attempting. It arrives with a narrative already attached, and that narrative, in the immediate aftermath, is almost never interesting data point. Let me analyze this calmly. It's usually closer to, I knew it. I knew this would happen. I knew I wasn't ready for this. I knew this was a mistake. The narrative is the problem, not the failure itself. The failure is an event. The narrative is a choice, one that most people don't realize they're making because it arrives so automatically and feels so true that it presents as fact rather than interpretation. Here is what failure actually is, stated with as much precision as possible. It is a specific outcome that diverged from the intended outcome in ways that contain information about the gap between your current approach and the approach that would have worked. That's it. It is a data point with a specific shape. It tells you something. It does not tell you everything. And it certainly does not tell you to stop. Moment, mistake. I failed publicly at something once. Visibly, in front of people whose opinions I cared about. My immediate response was to withdraw from the relevant work for several months, which I framed to myself as regrouping. What I was actually doing was waiting until the feeling of failure faded enough that I could pretend it hadn't happened. The regrouping produced nothing. The months were simply gone. When I eventually returned to the work, the failure had taught me nothing because I had never examined it. I just waited for the feeling to pass. It passed. The lesson passed with it. The most expensive thing about failure is not the failure. It's the withdrawal that follows it. The period of regrouping, reassessing, recovering, which is sometimes genuinely necessary and more often a sophisticated form of avoidance that feels like self-care. Real recovery looks like examined failure followed by adjusted action. False recovery looks like time passing until the feeling decreases enough to feel safe again. Time passing is not learning. It's just time passing. Failure analysis. The deliberate, structured examination of what went wrong and why, is the process that converts an expensive experience into a valuable one. Without it, failure costs you the attempt, plus the time spent recovering from it. With it, failure costs you the attempt and pays you back in specific, applicable knowledge about what to do differently. The analysis requires two conditions. First, enough emotional distance from the event that you can think about it rather than feel it. This varies by person and by magnitude. Hours for small failures, days or weeks for significant ones. The point is not to rush into analysis while still in the acute phase. That produces rationalization, not insight. The point is to not indefinitely defer it in the name of waiting until you feel better. Second, the willingness to look at the controllable factors rather than exclusively at the uncontrollable ones. Every failure involves both. The timing was bad, that's real. The market shifted, that's real. The circumstances were unfavorable, probably also real. And there are specific things you did or didn't do that contributed to the outcome. Those are the things worth examining. Not because the external factors don't matter, but because the external factors are not adjustable by you for next time. The internal ones are. What specifically did you underestimate? What warning signs did you notice but not act on? What decision, in retrospect, was the hinge point? What would you do differently with the information you now have? These questions are uncomfortable. They're supposed to be. The discomfort is the learning. If examining the failure feels completely fine, you're probably not examining it carefully enough. Once the analysis is complete, the protocol for recovery has one overriding principle: speed. Not the speed of returning to full capacity. That's progressive and gradual and should be. The speed of returning to any positive action related to the goal. The gap between failing and taking the next step is the variable that determines whether this becomes a temporary setback or a longer interruption. Every day that gap grows, the cost of returning increases. The identity evidence shifts. The momentum dissipates. The story calcifies. A setback that would have cost a week of disruption, addressed immediately, can cost months of disruption if left unaddressed long enough. The next action doesn't need to be impressive. It needs to be soon. One small thing, chosen deliberately, that proves to your own nervous system that you are still someone who moves forward after falling. That the falling didn't redefine you. That the story continues. Progressive recovery, returning at a lower level than where you were and rebuilding gradually, is not defeat. It's engineering. You are not the same as you were before the setback in every respect. You have accumulated some version of stress, disruption, and lost momentum that needs to be accounted for. Pretending otherwise by immediately attempting to return to full pre-setback output often produces another immediate setback, which is considerably more discouraging than the first one. Start smaller. Build back. Accept that rebuilding is its own kind of progress. There is a quality that the most resilient people share, and it is not the absence of difficulty. It's the refusal to allow difficulty to become identity. They fail, and they don't become people who failed. They remain people who are in the process of building something, for whom this particular failure is a chapter rather than a conclusion. This requires a relationship with failure that is not natural and not easy and not something you can manufacture through intention alone. It's built through repetition, through failing small enough times that the recovery feels manageable, through discovering repeatedly that the thing survived was survivable, through accumulating enough evidence of your own resilience that future failures arrive in a context that already contains the knowledge. I have been here before. I got back up before. I will get back up now. The people who achieve things worth achieving have usually failed more times than people who haven't tried, have attempted. This is not a coincidence. Failure is the price of attempting, and attempting is the price of arriving. You cannot buy the result without paying for the attempts. And the attempts come with failure included, at a rate that is not negotiable. The only question worth asking is not, how do I avoid failing? It's, how quickly can I get back to the work after I do? That question, answered consistently well, is the entire difference. You already know what you need to do. That's the part nobody ever talks about. How rare it is that the problem is actually a lack of information. You came into this knowing. Maybe not every mechanism, not every psychological term, not the precise name for each trap your brain has been running. But the thing you've been avoiding, you knew about that before page 1. You've known for a while. The knowing hasn't been the bottleneck. The doing has. And now you know more, which is useful and also slightly beside the point. Because here's the thing about insight, about every sharp observation and reframed idea and psychological mechanism laid out with clarity and precision. It has a half-life. Right now, something in this has landed, something connected, something shifted the way you're looking at your own delay, your own resistance, your own carefully maintained fiction of future you who will finally be ready. That shift is real. It happened. It will begin fading within hours. Not because you're inattentive, because this is how insight works. It arrives with force and then competes with everything else in your life for the limited resource of your attention. By tomorrow, the urgency will be softer. By next week, this will be something you remember reading rather than something actively changing your behavior. By next month, you will need to encounter the ideas again to feel their edge. Unless you act before the fading starts, this is the only window that matters. Not the weeks ahead when conditions might improve. Not the version of yourself you're planning to become after you've processed this properly. Right now, today, in the next hour. The window is open, and it is not staying open indefinitely. The choice between action and delay is made in the gap between finishing something like this and whatever you do next. That gap is where everything is decided. Not in the big dramatic moments, not in the grand declarations. In the small, specific, almost unremarkable moment where you either do the thing or you don't. So let's be precise about what you need to do, because vague conclusions produce vague action. There is one thing. You know what it is, not the category, not exercise or business or creativity in the abstract, but the specific thing. The particular conversation, the particular first step, the particular action that you have been finding intelligent reasons to defer. It has a texture. It has a shape. It's probably been in the background of your awareness this entire time, periodically surfacing and being gently submerged again. That thing, not a related thing, not a preparatory thing, that exact thing. The size of the first action is not important. The speed is. Between finishing this and doing something else, you take one step toward that thing. One email, one sentence, one decision made and recorded somewhere that commits you to the next one. Something small enough that the only honest reason not to do it is that you're choosing not to. This book has been, underneath everything else, about a single gap. The gap between knowing and doing. Every chapter approached it from a different angle, the psychology of delay, the architecture of identity, the physics of momentum, the engineering of environment. All of it was describing the same gap from different positions. The gap doesn't close through understanding it. It closes through crossing it once, and then again, until crossing it becomes more natural than standing on the near side. You have been standing on the near side for a while now. The other side is not dramatically different. It doesn't look the way you've been imagining it. It's messier, less certain, and more alive than the version that exists in your planning. It has problems the near side doesn't have, because it's real in a way the near side isn't. It's also the only place where anything actually happens. The most productive thing most people do every day is plan to be productive tomorrow. You've heard that line before. It was the first thing said. The only question left is whether it's still true about you after today. That's not a rhetorical question. It has an answer, and you're about to give it.